Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really proud of my hair bows. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome back. Whoop, whoop, to 52 Lockup. I am your Appletini Cadma of Bitten Apple TV. That was the first time I think I sounded like I beatboxed. Yes, took forever, but whatever. 52 Lockup is a series I started to talk about one of my biggest passions, which is actually true crime. The only people who actually knew about that is actually my best friends. Who knew? So a new episode on every Cat Maniac Monday for 52 Mondays. Hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to comment, feedback, like, subscribe, give me something. Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. If I got some information messed up, feel free to correct me. Like, I'm all for it. If you have updates on the case, something that pops up in the news, who knows, like forensics, let me know. Also, just for those curious cats who need to know, viewer discretion is advised. I'm not particularly grotesque details. However, there's some gross stuff that happens, so viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get started. Today's episode begins with Israel Keyes, who was born on January 7th, 1978 in Cove, Utah. Apparently, he was born the second kid, I believe, out of 10 kids, to a Mormon family of Heidi Keyes and Jeffrey Keyes. Apparently, Heidi and Jeffrey were Mormon expats from Torrance, so they just scooted over. And they also had their kids who were homeschooled, at least until about 1983, when Israel Keyes was about 5 years old or so. The family decided they were no longer Mormon and then just moved to Colville and Washington State to off the grid, basically. Small cabin, no electricity, no running water, just off the grid, like completely. At the new town that they were staying in, they attended 2 church services, particularly at Ark in the Christian Israel Covenant Church, which actually practices white supremacist Christian identity ideology. If you look this church up, you will find Israel Keyes is right next to it, along with his crimes. In the future, Keyes would actually describe the church as a militia Amish-like community, which is strange given the circumstances that the Amish are predominantly mostly defined by their anabaptism, which is actually a Greek term that means, again, a new baptism. So basically one who is baptized again. It's actually a class of Christians who perceive baptism during the infancy stages are basically invalid. It doesn't count because the infant did not really have a choice. So it's really interesting, like really diving deep into that, but I'm getting sidetracked. But however, Anabaptists, regardless of anything, including the Amish, also do not participate in things like militia, law enforcement, war, violent things. So I presume what Keyes meant about describing the community was basically they took what they liked about the Amish, which is living kind of off the grid, right? And then sprinkled military forces on top of it. That's the only thing I could see what would make him say militia Amish-like community. Which is weird because I'm just like, did you ever meet the Amish? But whatever, I'm getting digressed. So too many questions. During this time, Israel became actually good friends with his friend Chevy O'Brien Kehoe, who was actually born on January 29th, 1973. They were close in age, had close birthdays, they were friends, fun. Not so fun fact, Kehoe apparently in the future will be known as an American white supremacist who was convicted of murder in 1996 for kidnapping, torture, and murdering William Mueller and his family, along with another friend, Daniel Lewis Lee. Another American white supremacist. Apparently they were robbing the family in Arkansas, and then they decided, let's just torture and kill everyone. Let's do it! Apparently all 3 of these people were all members of the Christian identity ideology group. So I can cover Chevy and Daniel on another 52 Lockup moment, but birds of a feather, whatever. So I digress. During this time, growing up, Israel was apparently getting into a lot of trouble. He was breaking into his neighbors' homes and stealing their guns. And he particularly took a strong liking to hunting. And he loved hunting so much that he would happily hunt anything that had a heartbeat. This is important as it's building. He was fine with, torturing animals. That's become the common highlight for psychopathic people who tend to become serial killers. No. In the future, Israel actually states that, I quote him, "I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay, that nobody else seemed to think were normal and okay." So he knew when he was 14, he knew. So Israel renounces his Christian faith by the time he's a teenager, and then he grows interested in Satanism, which his parents were like, whoa, we quit being Mormons, but we're not doing Satanism, get out. Like, they just threw him out the house. So when he became like a legal adult, and I guess he met some lady. I don't have the names of the women. And I didn't honestly dive too deep in it because I kind of feel bad for them, right? But as an adult, he did move to the Makah Reservation community in the Washington state. Now, just for those who may not know, the Makah Reservation is actually a Native American Indian reservation for the Makah tribes. They are infamous for their whale hunting skills that even includes going out to sea as far as 30 to 100 miles to hunt the gray whale. That skill. He lived there with the mother of his daughter temporarily. And then at some point they separate and he gets a girlfriend. But again, there's details missing that I just couldn't find online. So in 1998, Israel joins the army when he's about 20 years old. And then I think he stays there for like just a few years or so. He was stationed over at Fort Lewis, Fort Hood. He even went to Egypt. And down the line, his army friend would actually describe Keyes as someone who was like very quiet demeanor, traditionally kept to himself, but he was a heavy drinker on the weekends. Apparently his favorite bottle was Wild Turkey bourbon. But his army career would come to a stop with his honorable discharge in 2001. Unfortunately, I was unable to confirm what the dishonorable charge was about. I mean, because the only thing that he had on his record was a DUI. That's it. That's it. Like, nothing crazy, just DUI and honorable discharge. So, in 2007, finally, he begins his own construction business. I believe he owns a little bit of land as well, and he calls his construction business Keyes Construction. He started the business from the bottom. He worked as a handyman, contractor, and a construction worker. I mean, this sounds like everything's going well. He's a great guy, and like nothing is wrong, right? Yeah, okay, too good to be true. Apparently he was so sweet and endearing, and so like charismatic with people. Key thing with serial killers, right? Even an attorney general actually hired him for his contracting skills. However, later in his interview, Israel would actually admit he actually had his first killing in 1998. Now, this is around the time when he first joins the army. So I'm either guessing he did this right before or right during the time that he joined the army or right after. Because like I don't know the schedule. But either way, being in the army obviously kept him preoccupied. That he did not kill for 3 years until he had the honorable discharge and then started up in 2001. Kind of wish he stayed. At least this way he was going to do killing there. Whatever, right? But I digress. Alright, whatever. I just think it's weird. I'm like, you're in the army. You find out later that he loves to kill. And you're just kind of like, you should have just stayed there or just became a unit assassin or something. So you could do that for like good or I don't know, whatever. After 2001, Israel had a bevy of victims by then. He would actually randomly pick them across the United States like he was going shopping. And he did this during his travels to intentionally avoid detection, right? So he hunted people primarily in like isolated locations like campgrounds, cemeteries, public parks. He had a preference to killing people by strangling them because apparently, I quote, he enjoyed watching his victims lose consciousness during their struggle to live. So out of his killings, he said he had one rule. Apparently, he was not going to kill children or the parents of children because apparently his daughter had a huge effect on him, and that's why he was like, I can't do that one, darn it. Which is strange, considering the fact that the people he did kill, because his daughter at some point would grow up to be that age. So never mind. I'm asking too many questions. I'm asking way too many questions that cannot be answered. But let's talk about the victim that actually got him exposed. Because it's evident that this man was not going to stop. So her name was Samantha Koenig. She was your normal brown-eyed, brunette, bubbly 18-year-old girl. She was an Anchorage barista at Common Grounds Espresso at 630 East Tudor Road. Anchorage has a lot of coffee shops. I mean, from what I understand, they have more coffee shops than any other state, and that includes Seattle. But these coffee shops, the way that they're structured, they're not structured the way you might see it in New York City or in Seattle and LA. These are small drive-thrus that really kind of only permit one employee at a time to work there. Samantha landed the job there, so she was just like, ah, I'm excited. She was all excited. She will save up money, and she's got dreams and goals and all these things that she wants to like do. She's like, you're excited, pump, 18-year-old. She's all there for life. Her father, on the other hand, he was not enthusiastic about her shift hours, right? So we learned that he wasn't pleased to learn that she would be working alone at night, and Samantha, she pleaded with her father. She was like, everything's going to be fine because the stand is equipped with surveillance cameras and it's a panic button should the barista need to summon the police. She would be working there primarily for a month. And by then, she's got loyal customers who loved to see their favorite barista. They were like, oh, I love you and how you make your coffee, right? There's so much love there. Then on February 1st, 2012, Samantha was scheduled to work the late shift at the coffee stand and was scheduled to be there until closing time at 8 p.m. She didn't have her car at the time, so basically from what I understand, her boyfriend was supposed to stop by, pick her up, and give her a ride home. Now, while Samantha was planning on seeing her boyfriend that evening, she had all these magical 18-year-old things that she was thinking about. He had already moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and he was already planning to rob that particular coffee stand, none for any other reason but because it was open late. Israel grabs his ski mask to cover his face and parks his car down the road and walks over to the stand by 7:55 p.m. This is 5 minutes before she was supposed to clock out. Israel approaches, smiling Samantha, and she's like, how can I help you? What can I get you? She's excited. She's full of life. This asshole orders an Americano. Samantha begins becoming the outstanding barista that she is. She happily makes him a drink. She's getting stuff together. She's setting the drink. She turns back around. Homeboy is holding a .22 Taurus handgun right at her, and she's just and you see this in her video, and she just hands up. He tells her to cut the lights off. So she cuts the lights. She cuts the lights off. He pulls himself through the window of the coffee stand so he can be in there with her. She was so terrified she didn't hit the panic button. I mean, she's 18 years old. I mean, she's about to get picked up by a boyfriend. She's thinking of 1,000 things. Maybe that would have saved her life. I can't confidently say that it would have, but the truth is every little bit would have helped. And the only reason why I'm saying that I don't know confidently if it would have helped her, just because of all the things that you end up finding out about this man. Israel tells Samantha that this is a robbery. And she's like, well, my boyfriend and my dad's going to be here any minute. So now he's thinking, can I kidnap her? Cutting it close. Apparently, Israel had 2 ground rules for his human hunting sport. It was never to hunt close to home, right? And he never seemed to have killed more than twice in the same area, right? He also never used his own vehicle for an abduction. He broke his first rule. And he decided, well, broke the first one, might as well break the second one. He knew all he had to do was actually convince Samantha to walk to the car with him. He apparently later told investigators that he simply lost control. Yeah, because that's what every man's... All right, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm sorry, I'm getting really upset about the case. He was overwhelmed with a burst of adrenaline and decided to take a chance on abducting Samantha. I really wish he hadn't. I really wish he would have stuck to his rules, but all right, anyways. So he has Samantha walk out of the coffee stand with his arm around her. He's got the gun pointed at her side. And at some point, she apparently broke away from him. But, I mean, this is February. This is Alaska. I mean, there's stuff around, there's ice, there's snow, whatever. Unfortunately, she was unable to outrun him, especially in the weather, and he caught her again. And he promised her that if she tried it again, he would kill her. Quite frankly, she was better off getting shot in the parking lot. Once they get to his truck, he secures her inside, and then he demands her, give me your debit card. And she's like, that's inside my boyfriend's truck. So the truck was actually parked in front of her father's house later in that evening. So he decides to drive off just as Samantha's boyfriend's kind of pulling in. The scene looks off, right? It's the beginning of February. Samantha has no car. She has no way to travel, no coat, no nothing. The coffee shop looks like someone just got up and just walked out. Didn't lock up, didn't do nothing, just left. So Samantha's boyfriend, his mind is racing like, where's Samantha? So her boyfriend begins like freaking out. And apparently later on in the evening, to avoid him from freaking out, the boyfriend receives a text message from Samantha's phone saying like, I'm just gonna like go on vacation, you know, like, oh my god. Which was obviously ringing like big alarms to everyone because everyone knew she was not going on vacation. What the fuck? What happened? They knew something was severely wrong. So Israel apparently drove Samantha to the house that he shared with his girlfriend and his young daughter, you know, the one that allows him to have rules, and placed her into a shed next to the house. He told her, if you scream, I will kill you. And then he turns on the radio in the shed to cover up the noises that she may make inside the shed. And then he proceeds to drive to Samantha's father's house to find her boyfriend's truck, to break into it, to get her debit card. Like, I mean, the fucking audacity, right? So the boyfriend is freaking out while everyone's trying to figure out, like, where she's going, what happened to her. He hears a noise. He's like, what the fuck's going on? He looks out. He spots Israel. Doesn't know it's Israel. Sees him going at his truck. What are you doing? Israel manages to grab the debit card, takes off before anyone can fully identify him, right? So now he just looks like a car thief. No one's like, what the fuck is this? So, I mean, you really got to think of, like, the arrogance and the audacity to return home, carefully climb up the stairs to make sure he's like, everyone's asleep? Okay, I'm gonna go downstairs. He grabs a glass of wine and then goes back to the shed. Apparently, he's sipping on wine while he's repeatedly raping Samantha. And when he's done raping her, he strangles her because, of course, that's what he enjoys, right? Then he wraps her body in a tarp, shoves her body into a cabinet in the shed. Woke up the next morning to play his doting father role to his daughter by waking her up for school and called a cab for a ride to the airport because they were like, oh my god, you're going to go to school, never going to go on vacation? It's a family affair! He took his fucking family on a vacation. Because, you know, that's just what you do. You know, you just wake up and you're like, oh, family time. After you ruin someone else's, but alright. So, he returns after his cruise, like 2 weeks later, and then he drives down to Aledo, Texas, and burglarizes and burns down a house. Then he robs the National Bank of Texas. He's like, bro, like, what are you doing? You have a successful business. You can't just focus on... All right, I'm getting upset. He then simply drove to Houston and then flew back to Anchorage. You know, like, life's good. It seems like his crime are beginning this time, like, they're starting to pick up, right? He's starting to become a little bit bolder, right? Because there's an air of confidence, you can tell. And I think it's because he went too long getting away with his crimes, so now he's like, I can get away with anything. You know, because there's no concerns for the cameras at the coffee shop about going to Samantha's home to steal her debit card specifically, then robbing and burning down a house in Texas, then robbing a Texas bank. I mean, he was on a roll. He was like, I am untouchable. Like, he just had that idea. 18 days later, on February 19, 2012, Israel drops his daughter off at school for daddy brownie points and returns home to remove Samantha's body from the cabinet to have sex with her frozen corpse. I really struggled to comprehend necrophilia. I mean, there are some things in life, like, I just know some people you're just never going to understand, and that will be fucking one of them. I can't. Anyways, a few days later, apparently decides, oh, you know what? I should put some makeup on her. He wanted to make her look lively. And then he sews her eyes open with fishing line and then photographs her with a recent newspaper demanding a ransom of $30,000 from the grieving family. And when I say he demanded it, he sent the boyfriend a text message stating, Connor Park sign under pic of Albert. Ain't she pretty? On February 24th, 2012 at 7:45 p.m. The family flies to the park, right? They see the evidence, they're like, don't touch, call the cops. They call the cops, right? There is a fucked up sub-level of cruelty to do this because this is presented to the family and friends, her boyfriend, her loved ones, Samantha's loved one, to think she is still alive. That is beyond fucked up. I mean, He should have just shown that she was dead let them grieve. Like, he gave them a deep sense of false hope and then ripped it from them basically twice. I don't know if there's enough therapy or coping mechanisms to aid a person who's left behind to deal with that. I mean, Israel had the intention of using Samantha's debit card to withdraw the $30K from her account, which in hindsight really shows how like super silly this man's aura was. I mean, he's on God mode in his head. And I think he really thought this was all going to like last and work. Several hours later, Samantha's father ends up depositing $5K into Samantha's account, thinking, you know, since the newspaper clipping was dated February 13th and the text was received on February 24th, perhaps his daughter is alive. A few hours after that, money is withdrawn from the account. That makes me so mad. Like, really, bro? A few days later, over a course of 3 trips, Israel decides to cut up Samantha's body and dump her remains in Matanuska Lake near Anchorage using wire and weights, and then he just goes ice fishing afterwards after he drops her body in the lake. Like, you know, drills a little hole and he's like, oh, you know what? Now that I dropped her body, let's go fishing. Apparently he caught fish and took the fish home to go eat, you know, with his family, because he's such a focused family man. March 7th has now rolled around and Israel flies out to Las Vegas, rents a car to drive to Willcox, Arizona, where he was going to withdraw $400 from Samantha's debit card. 90 minutes later, he drives to Lordsburg, New Mexico, withdrawing more money. He wore a disguise when he made the transactions, anticipating obviously like ATM security cameras, but he didn't expect the one that was going to pick up his white Ford Focus rental that he was driving. Now, there was no license plate in the photo, but a lead is a lead regardless. So Senora Karma starts putting on her heels and she is heading her way towards Israel. Because ironically, he had mechanical problems with his car and he returned it to the agency, right? To exchange for another vehicle. He was given another white Ford Focus. March 9th, Israel withdrew more money at another ATM in Humboldt City, Texas. I assume, with all of this driving, what the fuck did he tell his girlfriend and his daughter? Like, yeah, daddy can't be there. Like, I'm totally doing work. Love you. Like, I mean, what were you telling them? The FBI basically gets an alert out to look out for a white Ford Focus. It is now March 13th. Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry spots a car at a hotel parking lot. He's like, is that a white Ford Focus? Oh, there goes the driver. I think I should follow him. So he starts following him, and he noticed that he was driving 3 miles over the speed limit. Henry trusts his instinct, stops the car. He's handed over an Alaskan driver's license. He's like, whoop, 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 whoop. Like, all his alarms are going off, right? Henry calls for backup. He's like, think I got something. He knew, like, in his gut, though, he had something. He knew. Like, the alerts were sent out to Texas about the crime in Alaska, so he knew. Henry's now looking at Israel's license plate, the car, and the fact that he looks like the photos that was disguised individually in the ATM cameras machine. Senora Karma is coming. Taking Samantha's card to withdraw. So Henry felt like he had probable cause to hold Israel and searched the car. He found dye-stained rolls of bills from a bank robbery. The mask Israel worn during his bank withdrawals, a gun, Samantha's debit bank card, and her cell phone. Bam! Arrested. Sent back to Alaska. Got him! Sorry, got really excited. Just pardon me. So, in the beginning, Israel's trying to play hardball with the investigator. He's like, I'm not speaking. He caves in by March 31st to talk. Now, I'm not sure how he planned it on getting out of this. I mean, matching mask, gun, consistently making bank withdrawals, had Samantha's card and her cell phone. I mean, how did Samantha's card and cell phone get out there, bro? Like, did she make a stop to Texas before her boyfriend picked her up? Like, did she take a 6-hour flight to Texas, dropped all that stuff, and you found it? Is that what happened? Is that what happened? Eventually, on March 31st, he admits to abducting her. And he said he would give more details to the investigators as long as they kept his case quiet and away from the press. He was very concerned about what his daughter would think of him. Apparently not concerned enough what she would think of him for him not to do it, but I digress. Or to stop, but whatever. He was also worried about his friends, his neighbors, like, oh my god, everyone's gonna find out, and like all his happy clients from his business. He's like, they're gonna know. Like, how are they gonna know? They're gonna know. How are they gonna know? Like, that's what was going on in his head. And like, really? Your neighbors, but you didn't care about the one that you killed? Alright, whatever. He needed time for reality to like set in how his life was going to change. Because, you know, everyone was now going to know that he was the monster, not under the bed, but rather in the sheep's clothing. Investigators low-key had to want to just like, for like, you know what I mean? Like, are you kidding? You need time, bro? You need time? Like, I couldn't, this is why I can't be an investigator, because I would have hit him. I mean, Samantha wasn't given much time, but, you know, sure, let's make demands. The investigators wanted confirmation if Samantha was dead or not. I mean, they need to know. I mean, because he sent out that paper, right? He wasn't ready to give the details. He said, I'll tell you everything you want to know. I'll give it blow by blow if you want. I have lots more stories to tell. Investigators are now intrigued. And then they come to the realization, oh shit, he's not a messy, like, first-timer kind of criminal. We may have an arrogant serial killer in our hands. So, Israel described himself as two people and personally enjoyed being the two different people. One of his apparently hobbies was being able to be one person and no one knew who he was the other. Like, he was just like, this is a fun game. Israel came out with his list of demands, like they were Santa Claus, and he was like, these are my gifts. He wanted a speedy trial and the death penalty. He wanted the death penalty carried out within a year. Second, he wanted to keep the details of his crimes secret from the news media. He assured the investigators that unless they met those two demands, he would not divulge information about other crimes he might have committed. He did agree to tell the investigators the details of the abduction and murder of Samantha Koenig, as well as where to find her body. A few days later, police actually recovered her remains from the lake. It took them about 10 hours to recover her body, at least what they could recover. His biggest concern was how his daughter was going to be negatively impacted by other people IDing her and realizing her dad's the boogeyman of fucking Alaska. Killing random people like he goes grocery shopping. I mean, the police had to have been tired of his nonsense. I mean, they entertained him to get as much as they could out of him. And then at some point they actually go retrieve his computer and end up finding out about a missing Vermont couple. And they're like, fuck's this? And he's like, you're lucky. I was actually going to throw that computer into a landfill right when I returned from Anchorage I was going to go to Anchorage from Texas. Like, you guys literally caught me right before I did it. You got me. I mean, I would have punched him. This is why I can't be an investigator. I would have been like, anyone? That would have been it. Too many questions, asking stupid. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I started asking him questions about the Vermont case, and he said, I'll give you more details if you schedule my execution date. He wants to be killed in a year, because, you know, he's a bitch. Finally, though, he ends up telling them where they left the bodies of Bill and Lorraine Currier in an abandoned farmhouse near Burlington, Vermont. When the prosecutors asked Keyes, hey, how'd you know them to murder them? He apparently got annoyed and was like, that's a stupid question. It was just random. They were home. Yeah, like that horror movie? Because they were home. He was looking for like a garage he can get into, and he did. He was an opportunistic killer. I mean, he had no type. He just picked them, much like the infamous Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez of California. He was just kind of like, oh, your window's open. Let's do this. I mean, he broke into their home on June 8th, 2011, tied them up, then drove them to the abandoned farmhouse, shot the husband, and then sexually assaulted the wife. And, of course, he strangled her. Their bodies were actually never recovered. Apparently, it was learned that in 2009, Israel had pre-planned his murder so well, because remember, they died in 2011. In 2009, he buried a murder kit near their home, and then after he murdered them, he simply just moved the contents to Parrishville, New York, which is where they stayed until he actually was arrested. He planned their death 2 years prior, flew to Chicago, rented a car, drove 1,000 miles to Vermont to get his kill kit that he buried, and then kill a random couple that was simply minding their fucking business. Bro, what the fuck? Quickly, just to dive into the other deaths, it's also believed that Israel may have murdered Deborah Feldman in April of 2009 after he started his business, because, success isn't enough. She was killed in New Jersey but buried near Tupper Lake, New York, with all this plotting. I mean, you couldn't just do the Code of Harry. If you were really going to go through all this trouble, you could have done the Code of Harry. I'm just saying. But no. Let's just choose innocent people who are minding their business, just choosing to live life at their best. I mean, apparently he admired Ted Bundy enough, and he was like, I'm a fan. But these were two different types of killers. Now, the reason why they're two different types of killers is because Israel avoided detection, which is why he traveled a lot. Bundy killed across the country because he moved a lot. Whole different thing. Bundy also focused on women. Israel didn't care. You were just breathing, and the wind blew in a different direction. He's like, that one. However, apparently, he frowned upon the famous Dennis Lynn Rader, the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill killer, or the BTK strangler. Apparently, he thought of him as a wimp or weak for apologizing in court. Personally, I think if you're going to talk that much shit, you think you're that much badass, I think you should have said it to another serial killer's face. You know what I mean? Just talk shit. If you're really going to be that, if you're going to be about it, be about it. You know what I mean? Don't talk trash about another serial killer and call them weak, but you won't say it to their, to another person. You know what? Never mind. I'm sorry. I mean, he was cooperating a lot with the police, and then his name got leaked to the media, and he was like, you guys didn't keep your end in the bargain. Anyways, Samantha's family had her cremated and held a memorial service for her on Easter Sunday. During Israel's trials and routine hearing on May 23rd, 2012, he apparently attempted to escape. He broke his leg irons and he jumped over the railing, but he was tasered to the door, hit the floor. Motherfucker ain't going nowhere. It must have dawned on him, wait a minute. This is not going to be a quick process. I don't think I'm going to get that death I was asking for. I mean, it's not much. I mean, because it's not much to let people live, but you want your death when you want it because you don't want to sit in jail. All right, yeah, sure. But apparently while being held in jail at the Anchorage Correctional Complex on the suspicion of murder, he concealed a razor blade and he killed himself. December 2nd of 2012. He couldn't handle prison and he left a suicide note of ode to murder, and left no other clues really about his other possible victims. Only recently had it been released to the public that there were weird drawings he made what they suspect to be his own blood that were left in his cell. Pentagrams, a satanic head, and then 11 skulls. Since he never confessed, it's believed that the total number of victims he had were 11, but they're not sure because he was also an arsonist, necrophiliac, murderer, burglar. I mean, he was just building up a racket. He was just wow, what is it that I have not done that's illegal? As additional information, apparently according to the In the Sun, Emma June wrote an article about Christina Alverson, who believes she was actually a potential victim of Israel Keyes. Emma June reports that Christina Alverson stated that she was visiting her grandfather's grave on his birthday to pay her respects at Restlawn Cemetery in Vidor, Texas, when she suddenly felt her life was in danger. She looked up, saw that a man was staring at her, and then began to sprint at her full speed. She leapt out. No second guessing, nothing. She just jumped up and just booked it. She begins running to her car as fast as she can. She immediately gets into her car. She finally makes it in. She locks her. The unknown male is about 50 feet from her. Apparently, when she got into the car and locked the door, he did this. His favorite team just lost. Apparently, that's how she described it. He was just ah! Oh! Fuck. Damn, that one got away. She drove off quickly, but not too quickly, because as she drove away past them, she never broke eye contact with him, and she made sure she knew what he looked like. She wanted to know who was the man who pursued her. 4 years later, after his death and trials had made it to media, she happens to come across an article online, and she goes, that's him. Christina also discovered that a man went missing the same day she was nearly abducted by Keyes, and she believes that that could have potentially been another victim to Israel. It seems the man who had disappeared traveled to Texas. He was there for like a wedding in the city, apparently not too far from where Christina lived, and he disappeared. His family has no idea where he was, where he is, and there have been no mentions of this particular man being found. I couldn't find anything else past that, primarily because they did not have the name. But yeah, apparently, he's like Dexter that just went off the rails and just couldn't follow the code of Harry. It is mind-blowing to know that, like, he goes through all this trouble because he doesn't want to kill anyone, which makes me wonder, was he a psychopath or a sociopath, right? Because here's the thing. With a psychopath, they have no remorse, no feelings, no nothing, right? Ted Bundy was a psychopath. However, with Israel, the fact that he had rules of not killing a kid, meaning that if he killed a kid, does that mean that he was going to have a feeling of remorse? Sociopaths will have remorse and still choose to do what they want to do. Whole other different ball game. So I do wonder if he actually was a sociopath versus actual a psychopath. They're still crazy, but, you know, just saying. No one knew. And if you check it out, actually on 48 Hour Show, you see the people that he interview, his friends, whoever it was that dealt with him. Nobody knew at all that he was a complete whack job, just killing people, torturing animals, and like no one knew any of this. He didn't do it for the notoriety. He wasn't like, I want to be famous, killer, which we all know there's a few good of them, amount of them that'll be like, I want to be known for doing this, like, instead of something useful for society. But he did it because he genuinely enjoyed hunting humans. And it's a dark concept to say, but if you're going to do that, just join the fucking army. Join the army. Become like an elite assassin and work for the government. I don't care what you do. Become the next Black Widow, male version. I don't care. But why are you fucking with people who are just living their lives? I mean, Samantha was just 5 minutes away. 5 minutes away from going, hey boo, work is done. Come get me. Miss you. She's 18 years old. All of his other victims, a couple sitting at home, minding their business. He breaks in through the garage, and they were the first house that he saw. They were like, I wonder if I can get in there. Ooh, again. That was it. That was it. They were home. Bro, find something to fucking do. And Christina, she's grieving for her lost grandfather. And you're like, oh man, she looks like she's taking it hard. I should go kill her. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Like, I can't comprehend that way of thinking. But I feel like if you're going to, be Dexter. Anyways, make good choices, people. Be better people. And yeah, like, what the fuck? I mean, this guy was building up a hell of a record. I mean, he was burning things, stealing from people, and then he was like killing people, abducting people. Then on top of it, then necrophilia. I mean, he just slipped that one, and then I'm assuming that wasn't the first goddamn time because he obviously preserved her enough to fucking do it, which is weird because the body's, you know, I'm not gonna get into it. I got into the rigor mortis and all that stuff in the last episode, and I'm not doing it right now because there's so much to process. There's so much to unpack there. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please feel free to give me some feedback. Like, subscribe. I need some feedback. Tell me what do you think of this fucko. And then just let me know, like, did you see anything where maybe they discovered more of his victims? Where does the rest of his murder kits found? From what I know, that I mean, it's still an active case. They're like looking for these things, but I don't think anything's ever actually been found. Tell me if you like my bow. as this is the only optimistic light thing I can give you for this episode, because I was just like, they need something light and fluffy, like my hair, for today's episode. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'm glad that he's caught now. I think it's bullshit that he committed suicide, because I mean, you're running around just killing people because the wind blew in a direction, or because they were like breathing, and you couldn't handle prison? Really? You couldn't handle prison, and then you're upset because you don't want your daughter to find out, because you don't know the kind of life that she's going to live, because she is your legacy. You obviously didn't care enough to think about not only just the fact that how people would treat her, how people would react to her, how people would perceive her, but how she would feel at the end of the day, knowing that the person who was like hugging and kissing her and while she went on this beautiful like cruise when she was such and such years old in 2012 was because the night of you had murdered an 18-year-old girl, stuffed her body in the shed like shit ain't gonna happen, and then come back, drop her off at school like, hey honey, you go do that, I'm gonna go paint up a corpse, and then play mind games with the family. He'd had to have died knowing how he fucked up her head, because that's gotta leave a hell of a scar. There's no way you can't tell me that doesn't leave a hell of a scar. Anyways, he fucked up. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of 52 Lockup. This is Kadma checking out.